Hello, I'm Noel Kingsbury, and with Annie Gelfoyle, together we run Garden Masterclass. Welcome to our YouTube channel. We put here the recordings from the session we do every Thursday evening at 6 o'clock London time, a practice we started during the April 2020 lockdown as a way of reaching out to the global garden and landscape community. We hope you enjoy this recording, but also please do check out our website for all the amazing range of information-packed webinar and workshop recordings we have. Maybe consider joining us because members get access to our vast archive of free material as well as discounts on the webinar recordings. We've also recently started a podcast channel on Substack. So we do a weekly podcast and so that's a way of accessing a lot of our recorded material that you can listen to whilst you're digging or driving or watering or whatever else. So I very much hope you enjoy this recording and looking forward to keeping in contact.
Okay, so it's 6 o'clock. Welcome. Well, it's 6 o'clock here. I know there's a lot of people watching from over the pond, so hello to you. So it's Thursday Garden Chat, and I'm just going to talk about a couple of things or a few things that are up and coming. We don't have any live events in the UK during August, but we do. Our next live event actually is in October at Raby Castle with Alistair Baldwin, which is a new venue for us, and we're very excited about it because Alistair and Luciano Jubilee have done a lot of design and planting work there. So that should be a really good day. And then we have another live event in November at Liz Nicholson's headquarters or Nicholson's headquarters, talking about sustainability and their new product Elemental. So that will be exciting. All of that's on the website. So what we do have that we're sort of adding gradually over the next few weeks are webinars and courses that are coming up during the autumn and winter. Noel and Nigel Dunnett and Cassian Schmidt have another new start date for the naturalistic planting design course, which has been incredibly popular. So that's backed by popular demand, and that starts at the end of September. All of these things are on our events page. They're all set in chronological order. So have a little look through if you're new to us, and have a look. If you'd like to sign up for a newsletter, this goes out generally the first weekend of every month, so we keep everybody up to date with what we're doing. Again, there's an email link on the website that you can just email us and let us know. And that's sort of all the sort of news and views. We do have some exciting things happening next month generally, but we can't really let the cat out.
Really going to tell people yet, are we?
No, we're not. We're going to
Yes,
keep them in suspense, basically.
yes, yes, yes.
More exciting stuff. So we're always up to exciting stuff. Anyway, I'm going to hand over to Noel, who's going to introduce our guest for this evening.
Thank you, Annie. Thank you. Well, when I introduce somebody, I always try to remember when and where I first met them, and I'm slightly puzzling with Jared. I think he actually was one of the people on one of our naturalistic planting design courses, and I remember looking at his website and thinking, "Gosh, here is somebody who's doing some really good stuff." Courses that I found. Yeah, I think I could benefit from those. Jared Barnes is a professional teacher of horticulture at a college in Eastern Texas, but he's also a freelance teacher. And his website has got some amazing stuff, Botanic Boot Camp, and a real sort of linking together an enthusiasm for botany with horticulture, which I think is something all too rare. He's got a really amazing range of things he presents on, and we're going to be getting him back for a webinar, I think in December, which is looking at some really important the kind of aesthetics of naturalistic planting. So now, Jared, first question, as always, how did you become such an enthusiast for growing stuff?
Well, I have always loved the natural world and always loved being outside. My parents encouraged it, and my grandparents also encouraged it as well too. And I think I was just a kid with a constant curiosity. I loved to understand, how things worked and existed in the outside world. I love to go out and look at stars at night. Fun fact, I once wanted to be a meteorologist because I would see these people, sharing information about the natural world, and I just didn't realize you could do that with plants. And so when I was 15, I took a master gardener course in Tennessee, where, of course, I was born and raised. And I was so young that my mom had to drive me because I didn't have a driver's license. And so
Well, you
everybody
must
thought
be several
that.
decades younger than your average master gardener. We always look at master
Yeah,
gardeners
that's right.
about this age
So
demographic. Yes.
exactly, yeah. So
Yeah,
my
great.
dad worked my dad was working afternoons, so mom took me and they thought that she was doing the class and she was just dragging me along. And
Yeah.
so I started asking questions about, companion planting or, about watermelons and, why they're triploid or, whatever. And so suddenly people began to realize that no, actually I was the one interested in gardening. And actually, for my undergrad, I did not study horticulture. I studied environmental biology
Mm, mm.
because we didn't have a horticulture program where I went to school. But I think that it was perfect timing because we were talking about some of these ecological models about competition and stress and plant species richness, these terms and concepts that are now coming more prevalent and bleeding over into horticulture. And so for me it was a really strong horticulture plus ecology background. And I was self-teaching on the side too, because with the master gardener group, we went and we heard P. Allen Smith. We went and heard uh, other people who were giving local lectures. I went and bought every book that Alan Armitage had one time at a garden show in Nashville. And the
Mm, mm.
last book he signed, he said, thanks for coming, Jared, but you're crazy. So I dropped like, $300 on books. And, back then that was still a lot of money. And now it's probably worth
Yeah,
500 or
yeah.
so. But it's just kind of been a constant curiosity and fortunate enough to have people in my life like my parents and other family members to help to encourage and help that foster and blossom.
Great, great. So now you've got a presentation for us.
I do.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Sure.
So
So,
we're all itching to see it, I think.
yeah, sure. I'll go ahead and get it started then. All right. So, Annie, Noel, can you all see the screen?
We can indeed, yes.
Yes, we
Perfect.
can. Lovely.
Right, great. So, what I wanted to talk about today slash tonight is, of course, the wild and wonderful South, because, growing up in this southeastern United States, this is an area that's very, very rich with a lot of great plant species, but I think that we're still trying to figure out how to grow naturalistically here because we have longer growing seasons, we have heat, we have humidity, which of course causes a lot of fungal pressure. And I think a lot of people are used to seeing southern landscapes as live oaks, camellias, just sort of these broadleaf evergreens. But I think that it's a whole lot more rich, and so that's kind of been my passion for trying to better understand how to grow plants. As I mentioned, I've been gardening since a very young age. So this is a photograph of me, about 5 years old, out hoeing corn and tomatoes. So still have the same smile. I've gained a few pounds since then, and I just turned 40 this week. So I've been gardening in some form or fashion for 35 years. And so, of course, I joke with people now I can retire and just garden the rest of my life. But again, growing up in Tennessee, my great grandfather was actually the one who kind of planted the seed of gardening with me because my parents both worked days, and they would take us up to my grandparents, my grandmother, and her dad's house, my great grandfather. And so he would go out and push the Troy Belt tiller. I would follow behind, raking out his footsteps, and grow tomatoes with him, corn, sunflowers, cowpeas, black-eyed peas, all kinds of fun stuff. And so that's where I really, really caught the bug, was working with him in his garden. But locally, this is kind of the landscape that I grew up around. If it wasn't farmed, usually it was growing up as some type of broom sedge with a few random trees here and there. There would be woods, along the floodplain areas, but most of West Tennessee, excuse me, was cleared for, of course, agricultural production. I'm reading the book The Great River, on the history of the Mississippi River Valley, and just kind of that whole area. And it's very fertile soils that people have been growing food on some form or fashion for thousands of years, even if you go back to the indigenous cultures. But one of the things that I was always disappointed about is I'd go through these wildflower books and I would see all these wonderful wildflowers of Tennessee, but there were just really none around me, and I could never figure out why. And years later in graduate school, I came across this diversity map from the United States. This is from the BONAP, the Botany of North America project. So if you're in the States, and even in the UK, I think you can still access this, but you can look up species distribution maps. So if you just go and type in like Echinacea BONAP, it'll show you a county by county distribution map of all Echinacea or Asclepius or Quercus. You just choose your species. But I put a red star where I was born and raised, and I always wondered, why didn't we have as many wildflowers there? Because if you went east or west, the number of species increased. And I always figured it was because maybe it had been farmed to death in that area, you know. But reading in James Hitchmogg's book, Sowing Beauty, he talked about this idea of very, very fertile soils can outcompete and end up reducing species diversity. And I think that's really what's going on in that sort of area where they call it that avoidance zone. But nevertheless, my passion for searching for plants and growing plants continue to grow and blossom. I was fortunate enough that out of college, I landed an internship at the Scott Arboretum, thanks to my friend Stephanie Cohen, who I met at PPA the year before. She connected with me with Andrew Bunting. And that was sort of the first formal education I would say that I had to good horticulture, to go up there and to talk about editing landscapes and to think about, you know, the plant choice and to also think through, you know, how we make decisions on how we care for plants. It was a wonderful summer learning from, you know, some of the best people in horticulture in the Pennsylvania area. You know, on the weekends, I would go to Chanticleer or Tyler Arboretum or Longwood and just really try to immerse myself in that area and learn as much as I could. And then, of course, after that summer internship, I went to I went to Raleigh, North Carolina, where, of course, a lot of people on here will know the J.C. Ralston Arboretum. And again, you know, outside of classes, I try to take advantage of everything that I could. I would go to the J.C. Ralston Arboretum on weeknights or mornings to visit and look and learn from the plants. You know, Plant Delights is in the area along with Duke Gardens and so many other great places and made a lot of connections there. And so after I finished up at NC State with my master's and PhD, I then went on to teach horticulture at Stephen F. Austin State University, where I'm located now. So I've been here 11 years. And I'm very blessed that, you know, we have a great student population here. We've got usually about 30 to 40 students in horticulture. And from what I understand from administrators, we are the second largest face-to-face horticulture program in the state. So this is a cool project we worked on a couple years ago where we're trying to do the Mount Cuba approach for trialing plants for the Southeast. And so our first trial that we're doing is Schizocarium, the little blue stem. Again, just trying to focus on these plants for green infrastructure and evaluating these. But everything you see here, the terraces in the background, the gravel, the mulch, et cetera, was put down and built by students. We didn't out-contract any of it or anything. And again, we had over 30 students work on this project from a variety of different fields, from welding and ag engineering to hospitality to horticulture. I mean, it was just a great project to work on there at the university. And then this is a drone shot from our house in East Texas. And it's funny, after I moved to Raleigh, North Carolina, I told myself, well, I'm never going to see snow again. Because, you know, in Tennessee, we get 1 or 2 snows a year. The first winter I lived there, we got like 5 inches of snow. So then I moved to Texas and I thought, well, I'm never going to see snow again because I love snow and really love the winter landscape. And then we've had 3 decent, really good snows. This is one of the heaviest snows we got. We got about 7, 8 inches. East Texas is kind of in this weird place where we have kind of this continental climate that comes down, but then we still have this tropical moisture that comes up from the Gulf. And, you know, sometimes those hit perfectly to form a snowfall. But other times, you know, we can get Bermuda High to set up over us and we can just kind of have some crazy weather. So these are 2 photographs from our house. On the left-hand side, those of you in the UK may have heard of this, happened a couple years ago. It's called Snowmageddon, where this massive cold snap came out of Canada, and normally we're zone 8B, which means our winter low is usually around 15 degrees Fahrenheit, and we were zone 6A for about 8 hours, and it killed a lot of stuff down to the ground or killed stuff, you know, right out. And then so that was 2021. And that's an extreme. That's probably once in a lifetime type event. But then on the right hand side, you of course see one of the hottest temperatures I recorded here at my house. It's 114 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's a 120-degree swing, which is kind of crazy to think about over the course of a year or two here in East Texas. And so we're fortunate this year we've had a cooler, wetter summer. But again, just kind of being here close to the coast, where we are, of course, privy to things coming down either out of the Canada cold area where of course there's really nothing to stop that, or hurricanes, wetness coming up, or again, like I said, sometimes that Bermuda high will sit over us and we won't get rain for a good 2 3 months. It's just kind of a variable place to have climate, and of course people talk about it becoming more erratic as well too with changing climates. So that's just kind of a glimpse about where where I live and garden. So I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the inspiration from nature because I thought, again, a lot of people may have never been through the southeastern United States, and there's some really beautiful places. One of the areas near and dear to my heart is the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. And this is an area where you can just go and experience nature as pristine as possible. This is Cades Cove, which you just love these open grasslands, and you can really start to think about these archetypes, like Thomas Rayner and Claudia West talk about in their book Planting in a Post-Wild World, where you start to see nature and sort of its element there. Or another place, this is a Graveyard Fields, where you're starting to get more forest, but then some mixtures of shrubs and blueberries and other plants growing in there as well too. Growing up in Tennessee, my parents and sister and I, we would love to go to the mountains, and so I've probably been to the Smokies, I don't know, 10 15 times in my life, just trying to explore and see. And so I put these in here because these were sort of my first examples of, again, nature kind of in its pure element, and learning from the landscape and beginning to draw inspiration from these places. Like if you look at this image that I took here at Graveyard Fields, you're kind of starting to see some of these elements that we think about naturalistic planting, about like a matrix layer and having diversity and layering, and this sense of mystery about you don't know what's going around that curve, and you want to continue to explore it and look at this area. And so again, the landscapes that we see in the Southeast are very, very varied. You have a place like Gregory Bald, that of course is up on the top of the mountains of the Smokies, where you have a very simple layered system. You have azaleas. This is a hybrid swarm of native azaleas that occurs up there, and they don't know quite the origin of them. The theory is that the gentleman that this bald is named after, Mr. Gregory, he would find unique species of azaleas, bring them up, and transplant them on the mountain. Of course, you can see that most of them are Rhododendron cumberlandens, which of course is that vibrant orange one, but then there's a few color varieties in there. But then you go down to like the Cajun prairies in Louisiana, and this is a very varied ecosystem to look at. No longer is it, just two simple layers that you have here of a grass matrix and azaleas shrubs. Now we have mixtures of goldenrods and bone sets, the eupatoriums, and blue stems and sunflowers, and just a whole host. And then you spread that foliage back and you look at the ground cover and you see that there's carex there and other species that are covering the ground, that are active and growing during the wintertime. Because again, we don't have a lot of time here in the Southeast where things are not growing, because even in December, January, and February, you still have carex and other low growing type ground cover species that are still active and can find some warm days to photosynthesize and grow in. And so, you go from the wet Cajun prairies of Louisiana out further into Texas, and you see, these more rural landscapes. You see the bluebonnets and you see the Indian paintbrushes, where they just literally cover roadsides upon roadsides. And this is, a quick floral display that people love to travel and see. I still crack up whenever I watch the Pete Odoff documentary, because there's that point where he comes to Texas, and I remember the first time I was ever watching it, I was sitting there and I thought to myself, that looks a lot like Texas. And then it popped up Texas wildflowers, and I was like, what? But people come from all around the world to really experience some of the amazing diversity. And this is a very quick show. These plants don't last long, because these areas will usually become baking hot by June or so. Usually things start to dry up around there as well too. And so these are short-lived species. Once fall rains return, usually you'll start to see those basal rosettes start to appear again with the winter rainfall. But I just teach students and tell them, some of these plants have figured out that Texas is hot and they just really don't want to be around and outside growing during the middle of July and August when things are frying. And then we have some really, really unique, cool ecosystems here in the Southeast. One of my favorites to go visit, of course, is the pitcher plant bogs that we of course have, and there's just a whole diversity of these from Texas all the way over towards Florida. And you just walk out into these areas and just see all these pitcher plants growing, and there's again just a whole host of diversity. In the background there are Magnolia virginiana that are also growing in that space. And there's just rare orchids can be found in these areas as well too. And it's sad that of course we've logged a lot of it and we've lost it, but there's still efforts to try to protect these areas and keep them thriving and going. But there's so many different selections of these pitcher plants now that are available on the market, and people can buy and have seed of. And then another thing too that I thought I would share is just some inspiration and thoughts about, plants that other people around the world may see on a regular basis that came from the Southeast. And so one of my favorite species of all time, of course, is Baptisia. I love it. It's got great four-season interest. It's got a storied history. It was one of our first subsidized crops here in the United States because they wanted, of course, to try to produce it as wild indigo. And then, you've got the beautiful example of how the bees work the flowers. Usually, the lower flowers down are more nectar rich and they're more female. Because again, the flowers are bisexual. So when they open first, they're male, and then later on they become female and they have more nectar. And so a bee will usually start on those lower flowers that are more female and nectar rich. They'll work their way up. The nectar amount starts to decrease, but the amount of pollen on the stamen starts to increase. So they'll get fresh pollen, they'll fly to the next flower, maybe on a different plant. Usually they'll start at that bottom, so with fresh pollen, they'll pollinate those more female flowers because that female period comes a little bit later on. So it's just kind of this beautiful coevolution dance. So this is Baptisia australis variety minor. And I know that, from reading some of the books, this is one that like James Hitchmock likes to use because it has that low dense mound. And this is a mostly undisturbed, I'm not going to call it a virgin prairie, but a mostly undisturbed prairie just outside of Dallas, Texas, where we got to go see it a few years ago. So I love Baptisia australis. Variety minor, just the straight species, but then there's other species as well too. I kid with people, this is the most beautiful ditch I've ever seen in my entire life. Just look at that Baptisia sphaerocarpa. This is the yellow wild indigo, and it's called sphaerocarpa because the fruit, the carps, are sphere shaped whenever they produce seed. And we think a lot of times, about how we think plants should arrange themselves. This idea about sociability and landscapes. And you look at this, and they're very, very dense growing here because this is sort of an edge habitat where not much else is growing. It's a wet area where these seeds can, of course, get themselves established, but it's just quite beautiful to see all of these. And so, what I also love about going out and seeing plants in nature is it starts to break down our thoughts about how these plants are used because normally Baptisia may be spaced further apart because we kind of think about how a long seasonal or anchor plant, a primary plant that might be for use in the landscape. But a couple years ago, Thomas Rayner and I were on an expedition in Arkansas looking for Amsonia hubrichtii, and we came across this acre-and-a-half field of solid Baptisia sphaerocarpa. This is all yellow wild indigo. And it's truly amazing. And he and I were talking about this, and we were like, this has to be a management thing where someone must love having this here and they just mow it at the right time where that seed gets dispersed. And, all it takes is 15, 20 years for that population to probably build up, and you'll get to enjoy this. So that was truly a treat to see as far as Baptisia goes. And then again, just trying to show people some more diversity of species. This is Baptisia alba, and this is about 25 minutes from our house here in East Texas. And there's about a quarter of a mile strip of just almost solid Baptisia alba in this one section here. And this form in East Texas gets a little bit taller. This is my wife, Karen. She's about 5'6". So you can see it growing about a foot taller or so than she is. So it's truly amazing to kind of see the diversity in some of these populations of plants whenever you get out and look at them. Now, I think that one thing that's going on here is that this is kind of a shoot root ratio thing that's going on where if you have 10 shoots, they're not going to be as tall. But if you have one, two, or three, they're going to be able to maximize that resource into those few shoots. So if you kind of notice there's maybe like one plant that's growing up that's really helping to give it that height. But truly amazing just to see these large populations of Baptisia. And, I also wanted to share a little bit about the expedition to Arkansas with Thomas because We went because he had asked the question, do you know where Amsonia hubrichtii grows, threadleaf blue star grows in the wild? Because they planted a rain garden near my house, and it's not doing very well. And so we reached out to some people in Arkansas, and so this is where Amsonia hubrichtii, which of course is again a beloved plant in horticulture, native to the southeastern United States. But that's it right there, right in the middle of that kind of dry creek bed that currently has water in it. And so these areas, of course, are moist during the summer or during the spring into early summer, but then they dry out and they bake. And the guy we were with who was showing us some of these barrens said that, it may get up to 140 degrees on these surfaces. Those roots on them typically go deep as well too. And we went and saw 6 other sites where Amsonia hubrichtii was. This is another place where we saw, and again, another beautiful ditch, right? But we kept seeing Amsonia hubrichtii along waterways, and the theory is not that it needs water, but that maybe water is actually the way the seeds disperse themselves, because other Amsonia seeds have been known to float or to be able to disperse themselves in streams. So maybe that's what's going on. Is that again, this is a species that has thin, frilly foliage. That was another theory that the guide was telling us, is that this frilly foliage is very adaptable to flood events. So it doesn't get torn apart like maybe something would in this sort of river scour habitat that you see here. So that's just a few examples of stories of plants that I've seen across the Southeast. I want to talk a little bit about Ephemera Farm, which is, of course, the name of our garden here in East Texas, because what I tried to do is, again, like I said, a lot of people are used to southern landscapes being live oak and camellias. I'm trying to diversify that, especially with our natives, because we've got so many great native plants. So this is what we started with. We have a log cabin that we bought about 8 years ago, going on 9 years now. But we bought this and we had 2.5 acres where we basically had turf grass. And within about 8 years, this is what I've been working on forming it into. Now, this is about 3,000 square feet. And of course, this is at spring glory. Usually about April 15th through April 25th is where we get peak color. But I've been working on trying to fill the gaps at other times of the year, and really trying to find some great native plants and adapted plants as well too. I'm not a purist, because there are some great plants out there that I love from other places as well too. But just trying to figure out ways that we can ecologically garden better here in the Southeast. So a few highlights that I just wanted to share. This is one of my favorites for using in spring. This is Indian plantain. This is Arnoglossum plantagineum. It's in the aster family. It starts out looking like the leaves are of hosta, but then quickly it elongates to become about 4 or 5 feet tall. And then usually by the end of June, it's dormant. And so, in spring, it can be hard to get that early vertical layer into landscapes. And so this is a great contender that I like to use. Another one, and this is one of my probably top 5 favorite perennials. This is Penstemon murrianus. And this is scarlet beard tongue, and it's another native of the Southeast. And actually, the plants I collected nearby, um, off the side of a road, and I'm glad I did, because they came in and bulldozed it all. So that population's now gone. There's still other populations locally, but I just love how this plant works this side of the color wheel, from green with little blue highlights, also purple highlights in the stem, and then on to coral and red. And hummingbirds love this plant as well whenever they're working on it. And then, of course, we have our milkweed and our monarchs. A couple years ago, I was out in the garden and found that green milkweed, Asclepias viridis, had just been decimated by monarchs. And so I picked up this handful of monarchs, and my wife Karen saw me walk by with them, and she said, "Ooh, gross! What's that?" And I said, well, these are monarchs, and I'm moving them from one plant to another. And again, this is early on, right after we got married. So she had grown up in a very, inside sheltered life, not much exposure to nature. Well, she began to realize that, monarchs, and these were beautiful butterflies that you could rear and raise. And so she asked for she asked, could we start growing more milkweed so maybe we could start rearing monarchs? And I said, yeah, sure. And so for Christmas that year, I got her monarch cages, that you can rear insects in. And so she walked in that morning of Christmas morning and saw them, and she said, "Oh, you got me laundry baskets." And I said, no, no, no. I said, I learned years ago that you should never get your wife cleaning products for holidays. And she said, well, I love cleaning products, so you can get those. But we reared our first monarchs that next year, and so she got to see them and enjoy them. But the other joy too that came from that is that having her exposed to the natural world, she started drawing these things. And so my wife is a graphic designer, and so she has a website, Southerly Design. And so on the left is her monarch pattern, where again she's done Asclepius and the monarch larva and the monarch, and of course the monarchs. And then on the right is just another one of her more naturalistic style plants, plant palettes as well too. So again, she loves that. She's more of that creative art background. Her uncle has one of the largest potter programs in North Carolina. So yeah, so she loves to draw things. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm always trying to fill gaps. This is the Lilium formosanum, which is Formosan lily. And one of my friends in Tennessee, Jimmy Williams, who I, of course, love to learn horticulture from, he was one of my early gardening friends, early gardening mentors. He said, what plant in the middle of July, whenever everything else is baking outside and it's hot or dry and humid, what else flowers its head off? And so, these flowers bloom for us and just look glorious in the summertime. And we oftentimes will have hawk moths that will work the flowers at night. So you'll see the flowers bobbing, just 5 or 6 hawk moths worth working these. Something else I want to point out in this picture is in the front right corner, you'll see Baptisia starting to go dormant. Baptisia for us goes dormant in about into July, early August. And so other places like in the UK or further north where they get that strong seasonal presence of it, it's usually one that, unless we want to look at black for another few months, I usually will go through and remove some of those plants just to kind of thin them out and help it appear a little bit more green. And then of course in the fall, I love asters. I've tried to collect a variety of asters and grow them. So this is just a quick snapshot. Usually by fall, things are looking pretty haggard. And we do still deal with fungal disease. Some years on asters, they'll get it bad and they'll kind of peter out. But this is kind of just a snapshot of some of the asters growing here. And then, of course, in the winter, when we think about garden design, we love to think about structure. So, you've got the Joe Pye weed, you've got the Eryngium, you've got the grasses in the foreground or in the lower layer. And then, of course, Lilium formosanum in the back. The white flower I showed you, not only do we get the good, strong white flowers in the summertime, but then we leave the seed heads, and that's those candelabras in the background that you see. And they're just such good structural winter interest in the landscape, not native to the US, but still just a wonderful plant to have and use in southern landscapes. So I, of course, not only love growing plants, but I also love teaching them. Like I mentioned, I wanted to be a meteorologist as a kid, and I was delighted once I found that people could have careers sharing information because I watched people on TV, and I would go to school the next day in second grade, and the teacher would be like, "Well, Jared, what's the weather going to do tomorrow?" And I would tell them the blow by blow for the next 3 days. And I just love sharing knowledge and sharing information. And so I'm blessed that I have the ability to do that too with students of all forms and shapes. Um, y'all, Annie and Noel, y'all probably appreciate this. I play a game in my herbaceous plants class called Pin the Plant on the Triangle. And so what students have to do is they have to look at sort of the growth habits of species like Achillea, which has rhizomes, or Pycnanthemum, which has rhizomes, or stress tolerators like Narcissus, that has a storage organ, or something that's short-lived like, Anothera or Gara. And they have to kind of figure out where on the triangle it goes. So this is just kind of a fun thinking activity of thinking about how do we take something that maybe is complex to people like Grimes Triangle and make it a little bit more fun and engaging for people. And so that's one of the things that Annie and Noel had reached out to me about was this idea about landscape perception, because I have this Botanic boot camp class on landscape perception. I started Botanic boot camp because with the newsletter that I have, I was getting these questions about how do you grow the way you grow in the Southeast? How do you, think about arranging plants? And so I love these models that allow us to think about how we can design better, how we can grow better. And so one of the ones that I became aware of was Rachel and Stephen Kaplan. They studied people's reactions to showing photographs of nature. And they begin to develop this working model of how we experience landscapes. And so this is kind of a teaser of the webinar that I'll be doing later in December. But what they said is that when humans look at landscapes, they have two desires. They want to understand and they want to explore. And the understanding and exploration can be immediate. So, like if you just look at a two-dimensional image, it can be immediate that you understand things, or it can be inferred. So what this does is it gives us a matrix of coherence, complexity, legibility, mystery, where coherence is immediate understanding, complexity is immediate idea of exploring the area. Legibility is inferred understanding, where you would feel comfortable navigating the area. And then mystery, of course, is inferred exploration. We don't know what's beyond. There's a desire to explore. And so, whenever I showed this image earlier, one of the reasons that this image is probably connected with a lot of people who are watching this is because those four elements are at work. We have coherence of color. We have complexity, though, where, of course, you have a lot of visual simulation in here, but it's not too much. It's not overwhelming. There has to be a balance between coherence and complexity. But then there's also legibility. We have the pathway, but we don't know what's around the pathway. We don't know if it's a waterfall. We don't know if it's a bear about to run at us. We don't know what's beyond. And so that idea of, again, exploration helps us. So coherence, like you see here at Out Off Field, there's this idea of the coherence of the Sporobolus, the coherence of the Echinacea, Dianthus, and this kind of all working along a similar color theme there. With complexity, like Beth Shadow. Actually, Annie, this is a photograph I took the day that we met. There's a lot of complexity here, where every few feet you walk, you have something new visually stimulating to look at. It's not overwhelming, because it's, of course, been designed well, but there is a lot of complexity to this image. And then, of course, legibility. One of my favorite gardens I visited was Le Jardin Plume, the feather garden in France, where, I mean, just such well manicured, where, of course, you have these beautiful edges. Like, you can look at this, and if this was just an unmown field, we would have no idea how to explore it. But we see that, of course, there's clean lines. We see in the background there's hedges with clean lines with openings in them. There's communication going on in this image that tells us how we can explore it better. And then, of course, mystery, photograph from hillside, where you see this pathway. And I love how that little thread of a path up there in that meadow is mown, because, again, we don't know what's beyond, and it's beckoning and calling to us. And so, as garden designers and horticulturists, if we understand some of these basic models that science has taught us, we can design better. And so that's today's or tonight's presentation of a little bit about who I am, lessons from the Southeast, ways that I teach plants, and a little bit about how I garden here in East Texas. So the QR code is linked to sign up to my newsletter. And then again, if you want to email me or visit my website, it's there as well too. So thank y'all.
Thank you, thank you.
Yeah.
First time we've had a QR code.
I know. It's very, very sophisticated. That was amazing, Jared. And
Brilliant.
Your photographs are absolutely
wonderful pictures, and it's a fantastic flora you've got down there.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure thing. Yeah.
And there's nothing like seeing plants in their natural habitat to really understand them. I mean, that some of those Baptisia shots, you just and also how you use them, or how you can use them. That penstemon, oh my goodness,
That looks a lovely one, doesn't it?
Yeah. Could you just say could you say the name again, Jared?
Yeah, I didn't quite get it either.
So Murray, like Bill Murray.
Oh yeah.
And then Anus, Anus, Murray Anus.
Fantastic.
Okay, right, yeah.
Oh, that is wonderful, really wonderful.
So, I mean, the in the south.
And again, a lot of penstemons are native to the Rocky Mountains, and you plant them here in the southeast, and they're just like, that is one that it takes our heat, it takes our humidity. I mean, of course, this time of the year you don't see it because all that's left is the basal rosette. But I was out weeding, and noticed they're there, they're just waiting, So.
Yes. I mean, I was wondering, how is the native plant industry in the south? I mean, I mean, there's always, I always have that feeling about the States that the interest in native plants and their commercial production was very, very regional. Some places were really ahead, and others behind. But
that is one of the issues we deal with, is that there's a lot of great plants out there, but they're just not super available. But I do think that is becoming more promising, because you have places like Hoffman Nursery, that of course is a great grass nursery. You have places like North Creek, which of course they're in Pennsylvania, but still kind of deal with the same humidity and stuff. And some of the plants that they grow are from the southeast, like Amsonia hubertii, or there's some Rebecca as well too that they have. But there's another great place too, Izel Plants, Izel.
Oh,
And
Yes.
what they are is they basically work with wholesalers to
Yeah.
make plants more available to homeowners. And so
Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah.
you can buy species from them, but
Yeah.
you'll find little niche nurseries here and there.
Yeah.
Most of the native plants end up being like maybe trademark name species or something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
mm,
yeah, it can be a struggle. So honestly, the way that I've gone is with trying to propagate and grow my own here at home
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
getting seed. Like there's this cute little it only gets about a foot tall, but it's a Helianthus redula, and it's a
oh,
rayless sunflower. It looks like a dwarf Eryngium almost, or Echinacea.
Does. Yeah.
It
Yeah.
just forms these like licorice black flowers, but the way I got it was a friend of mine in Florida sent me seed. And
Right.
so,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's kind of how sometimes we have to do things is trade plants, share
No. Yeah.
seed.
Yes. Yes. And wild seed collecting as well, I would imagine.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the
Yeah.
back roads. You can find
Yes.
some fun stuff on the back roads.
Yes. 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 Yeah. No. Some of my best botanical experiences have been on US back roads, actually. Yeah.
Mine
Yeah.
too.
and so your webinar coming up with this is on the 16th of December. So if anybody's interested, and why wouldn't they be after that presentation? We're really looking forward to that. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
all of that stuff about coherence and legibility. I remember, yeah, I first came across this with Daryl Morrison. I mean, this was years ago. So no, it must have been sort of it was definitely pre-millennium. I was when he was teaching in Athens, Georgia, and he lived in this house that was kind of like in the middle of the woods, and the trees were like this just outside the windows.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he was very keen on that. Well, this is a great way of looking at, because I mean, this is a problem with naturalistic planting, isn't it? I mean, how we get it across to people who are not used to the wild. I mean, how do you find that in terms of education? How do you get people enthusiastic about plants and gardens when they've not when perhaps that's not particularly a part of the culture?
Yeah, that's a great question. For me, it's the enthusiasm. So
Mm,
I have an intro horticulture class, and
yeah.
I try, I think that we, I think that we are too good at making plants boring. That monotone. I've been in lectures before where people are just like blah blah blah, stomata, blah blah blah, leaves. And I think that horticulture doesn't have the word fun anywhere in it.
mm, mm,
I
Yeah.
think that we need to put the fun into horticulture and show people that it's an option. There's also a great program here in the Southeast and oh, excuse me, in the US called Seed Your Future. And what it is it's a program to try to get young kids engaged with plants.
Mm,
And
mm.
that's really what the research is showing us is that it's an exposure thing. That
Yeah.
if they're not seeing and experiencing plants in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third
Yeah.
grade, I
Yeah.
think around 9 years old is kind of where the biological sciences trickle off in
Yeah.
schools. And so we're trying to expose people to it. But
Mm,
I think so that's one thing is
mm,
exposure.
mm.
Two is wonder, that whenever I give presentations, I have a whole inspirational presentation on how we connect plants with people. And that's where I start, is to say, you know, when pretty much every plant person I've ever met, the way they got into plants was they had an experience where they felt small, and not
mm,
small in a bad way,
Yes.
but there was a sense of wonder, like you're looking at the Grand Canyon, except you're looking at, a leaf or a flower or something going on in nature, and it just pulls you in.
mm,
With that wonder, we make the mistake, I think, sometimes in horticulture, where we create, instead of creating growth cycles for people, we create doom loops
Mm,
where
mm.
somebody has a failure, or
mm.
we plant landscapes that are just, meatballed boxwood. And
Yes.
so I think for if we're going to try to communicate the wonder of plants to people, we've got to show them ways that can be done, and
Mm.
Yes. Yeah.
plant
I
plants
mean,
and
well, yeah. I mean,
inspiringly
I
as
suppose
opposed to
it's
commodities.
through edibles. I mean, I noticed you had an edible landscaping on your website somewhere. Did I
Oh
see?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
sure,
Yeah.
sure, sure.
I mean,
Yeah,
I know
yeah.
that's something that I mean, so many people I know actually, they started out growing veg, and after a while discovered that there's a lot more interesting things you can grow than cabbage, and
Yeah,
that's
that-
been a real route in for a lot of people, I think. And I don't know about the States, but certainly in Britain, every now and again, vegetable growing goes in these kind of cycles. Every few years, there's a kind of craze for it, and then it dies off. But I mean, by the time it's kind of dying off again, there's a minority of the people who got into it have kind of moved on to other things, and particularly I think for younger people, that does seem to be such a way in.
yeah,
Eat it and
that was
grow
the
it.
way in for me too. And actually, when I got to the university, one of the first things we did was we made an edible garden. And
Yeah,
I had a student tell me the reason I changed my major was because I saw an edible garden next to the
yes,
agriculture building.
yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. Right,
Yeah, it works. Yeah.
yeah,
Mm,
yeah.
mm. And is horticulture popular as a study subject in Texas or in your part of Texas? I mean, are you seeing good numbers of young students or students in general, you know?
Yes. Our my intro horticulture class is maxed out. It has 140 students in it, and so we have students
Wow.
across
Mhm,
campus. I think the love and interest in plants is there.
Yeah.
We're trying to do a better job communicating the value of plant jobs. And I
Mhm.
do know from seeing the data that Seed Your Future is collecting, the college numbers, there was a slump there for a few years, but the college numbers are showing increasing enrollment.
Good.
Now
mm,
it's
mm,
not drastic or anything, but the good thing is that instead of going a negative slope, we're going more back up into a positive slope
mm,
from the numbers that I've looked at.
Oh,
mm.
that's good. That's good.
Yeah, it
And,
is
just wondering how things are in your neck of the woods with the whole lawn issue. I mean, I remember my first trip to the States was in 1992, and I remember driving from Massachusetts down to Chapel Hill in North Carolina, and just astonished by these horrific front lawns with maybe like a meter square of pink phlox in one end, if anything other than the sort of millimeter
right.
mown grass. And yeah, things have obviously come on enormously since then. But you still, I mean, we still hear about this old conflict about the front lawn and the sort of
Sure.
extraordinary role it plays in US suburban culture, and people are trying to sort of rewild the front lawn. I mean, how is that discussion? I mean, how I should ask how vicious is it in your part of the world? Because I gather it can get quite nasty.
Yeah, so I we live so where I live in Nacogdoches, Texas.
Mm.
It's a small college town. I would say that, we probably have about 35, 40,000 people or so that live here.
Yeah,
And so most of the people who live here live in rural areas, and the lawns are still quite large where people
yes,
still have large areas of but we live in the piney woods, so there's still a lot of forested area around because lumber is one of our top products.
mm,
But
mm,
even from that standpoint, there's still monocultures of pine trees.
mm, mm,
I will say though that I think that the discussion of trying to plant more natives, trying to reduce the amount of lawn, that is a conversation that a lot of people are having,
mm, mm.
really across the whole United States.
Well, yes,
I don't think it is permeated as well here in the Southeast yet.
no,
I
no,
I think it is getting there, and I think that
yes,
people are starting to sort of catch on.
yeah,
We still have a lot of people here in Texas in the Southeast that maybe raise animals or looking at
yeah,
holistic options
mm,
um,
mm.
for diversified pastures,
Right,
orchards,
yes,
that type thing as well too.
mm,
But I would say that the discussion on reducing lawns is healthy in the United States.
yeah,
Planting more plants is healthy. And what I'm trying to do is just trying to also help people see a healthy model to approach it.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
I try to think more about plant more plants,
mm,
because there's still mulched areas, parking lot islands, etc. And to me, what I think is the biggest way that we can try to really start helping people rethink about how to do this is stormwater management.
well,
That
yes, yes,
that we that is a real discussion for urban areas to have.
mm,
And once people can see that it can be done well, I think they'll buy into it more.
yes,
There's still this attitude of whenever people look at naturalistic plantings here in the South, and even I'd say across the U.S., they look at it and they say, "Oh, that's messy," or that communicates that no one lives here, or
yeah,
there's snakes in it.
Mm.
You know, somebody needs to come up with a movie. You know, you've heard snakes on a plane, like snakes in a prison, right? I would say that I'm promised by, you know, you'll go to areas like Houston or Dallas, and you're starting to see some of those areas start to change over. And I see Jenny nodding her head in agreement.
Mhm.
So the discussion is starting to permeate and break through. And what we've got to do is, again, just make sure that every planting we do is good, and a good
Yes.
model, a good healthy model for that. Because I
Mm.
know that a lot of these nurseries, they can't keep carex and grasses. You know, there's some plants they cannot keep in stock because people want so many of them. And I
Mhm.
think that's a
Oh,
problem.
wow. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's good. That's good.
Mm,
And
mm,
I mean, you mentioned North Creek, and I just wanted to point out for people who didn't know that North Creek do have a fantastic weekly newsletter. And people on this side of the pond might think, well, why is that relevant? But actually, it's always very interesting and often very relevant to us too. So I just wanted to point that one out because it's, you know, it's very useful to see what they're thinking and writing about.
mm, mm.
Yeah, I'll
So,
add, I love looking through their newsletter too. So it's got great information in there too.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's great.
Mhm.
I don't know if anyone has any questions for Jared. You've answered one question, which was about whether you could buy from ISIL. So, yeah.
I think they ship to Louisiana, but yeah, there's something about Texas, Jenny, that's just this magical place.
What that they won't ship to Texas.
They also have a great website. They have resources on frost-free dates, plant
Oh,
yeah,
right.
lists, etc.
no,
So
that's
that's
useful.
a good
Gosh,
way.
yes, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah, 'cause
that's
the flora of Texas, I mean, it's hugely varied. I mean, we did have Andrea from
Oh yeah.
Johnson about
Uh,
a year and a half ago, I think. She did a great presentation about Texas wildflowers, and
sure.
mm,
Yeah,
which
there's a
she's
whole
been,
lot more.
yeah,
Some people kid around that we're Western Louisiana here in East Texas because we still get 50 inches of rainfall on
yeah,
average a
yeah,
year.
yeah.
Some
Oh, that's
years it's
amazing.
25, some years
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
75, you know.
yeah,
right.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we kind of get some of the last we kind of get some of the last natives from the southeast, some
Right.
of the last natives coming down from the prairies, where it just kind of
Yes.
is a beautiful melting pot.
Yeah,
About
yeah.
5 minutes down the road from me is Bloodroot. You
Oh,
know,
really? Yeah, yeah,
yeah, and we're one of the last populations here,
yeah.
um, in the southwestern area. Yeah.
Mm,
I
mm,
love that you mentioned the little bit in the Five Seasons film of when Pete's in Texas and he
Mm.
stops the car and gets out to look at the well, lupins. You call them the blue bonnets, is that
Oh
right?
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, blue bonnets, yeah.
And then he goes to that sort of drive-by barbecue like
oh,
restaurant.
that hideous,
And
dreadful scene.
it's
Yeah,
just
yeah,
a mad. If anyone has not seen that film, it's Five
yeah.
Seasons. It's just wonderful and full of those wonderful. I mean, the whole film starts off with him in a cheese shop buying cheese. It's just brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
Yes.
I also like the way you mentioned Le Jardin Plume because that comes up time and time again, and I have yet to go there. Noel, have you been there?
I haven't, I'm
No,
afraid. No, I
no,
mean, I
no.
sort of, no, no,
Yeah,
afraid I
yeah,
haven't.
no. It's one of
It's
those.
like everywhere. Yeah,
It's over
yeah.
that huge channel from us. I mean, or from me anyway.
Mm.
But you know, I mean, I remember Jeff Lynch and Paul Orpello when they were over here, went to La Jardin Plume and drove here within the same day, and they both admitted that it made them both cry. The garden made them both cry. You know, and it's just lovely that a garden would have such an effect on somebody. So I would very much like to go and see it. And
I would say
yeah.
it's top three that I visited in my life. You know,
Oh,
Chanticleer.
really?
Yeah,
Oh
yeah.
yeah,
It
Chanticleer
has
is
that
one.
balance
Garden Inn,
between the
yeah,
sort of natural, between the wild and the clipped. I mean, that
Right.
French element of clipping is something that
Oh,
is very
yeah.
culturally strong. But that
so
the clip
you've got
is amazing.
Jardin Plume and Chanticleer. What's the other? What's number three?
Probably tied with Hillside and Great Dixter. Yeah,
Oh,
All
really?
right.
Yeah.
just
Hmm.
because those are just such great places.
Have
Yeah.
you made it down to Wildside, Keith's
No,
garden?
that was one.
That's
Whenever
it.
I
Good luck. Yeah.
emailed with y'all,
That's on you. That must be
and
on
that
your
was one.
next.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that is really
Uh,
quite exceptional. It's also somewhere that's kind of very on the edge in terms of its management and future. But no, it is so full of really idiosyncratic, innovative ideas that other people
Mm,
don't dare do. And going to somewhere like
mm,
Wildside, I think makes you realise that you can do really very different things that most of us tend to be rather, we do the same.
But also very relevant to tonight's talk, because what Keith's doing, he's taking his cues from the wild, isn't he?
Yeah,
Hence Wildside.
yes.
And so he's getting back to the wild. So oh, Jenny's saying I get to see Wildside in September. Oh, lucky you.
Oh, right. Oh, good for you, Jane.
Yeah, fantastic. Well,
Good, great. Well, thank you so much, Jared. That was great. And we really look forward to your webinar.
yeah, we've
Thank
got just a couple of comments. We've got
Okay.
from John. We've got great presentation. Thank you. Suggested resource on native plant root structures as to what plants may be planted in the same place succession. What can be overplanted on Virginia bluebells once they've gone dormant? So suggested resource on native plant root structures. Can you help there, Jared?
Oh, so is that a question that came in on the chat or
Yeah.
something else?
Yes,
Okay,
it is.
okay,
Yeah.
I didn't see it. So I
It's
know
just come in. Yeah.
okay, I know with Virginia bluebells, so they're looking for like once they go dormant or something, what you could plant in place. I
Yeah.
really love Carex. I really love Carex species. One of my favorite Carex species is Carex texensis. That's a really good one. But I know too, I think that somewhere in one of your books, Noel, there was a good example about with Virginia bluebells, panicum.
Yes, and this was Pete Aldous Borders that the Virginia bluebells has actually self-seeded in borders with prairie things, especially like really competitive grasses like panicum. They don't stop growing until May in northern,
Right.
whereas the Mertensia is kind of well on its way then. And so as the Mertensia is dying back, the panicum can take off. It's one of those really good prairie understory structures, for our style of plant.
And again, I don't know where the individual lives, but I would also look at maybe something like a chasmanthium. I know it seeds around, but it's beautiful grass.
Yes.
And it's one of those warm season grasses that tends to get going a little bit later on. So that might be a good option too.
The first part of his question is a suggested resource on native plant root structures. So
gotcha. Okay, so what I would recommend is there is a visual photographic online album of plant root structures, and I think it's from Wageningen University.
Oh yeah, Wageningen in the Netherlands. Yeah,
that would be a
is
really good
unfortunately very, very sort of large scale. I mean, I've really found that not much use.
What do you mean large scale?
I mean, it shows the whole root, so it doesn't give you really any sense of rhizomes, tubers, the vegetative spreading structures of perennials. I think it's really quite woody plant bias as well.
And your perennial directory would probably be a good resource.
Well, yeah, my perennial directory probably is the best source at the moment. Actually, don't remember her name, Jitka, her first name. She's a Czech researcher who's done all this work on underground structures of Central European perennials. She was doing a week-long workshop in Kansas last year. I think that might become a regular fixture. She obviously has some relationship with an institution in Kansas.
Maybe the Land Institute or something.
Yeah. So I mean, get her over with her spade. Yes, we must do something with her one day, and it's really interesting work she's doing.
So just to read out a few of the comments, Brett saying great presentation, thank you. Deborah saying thank you so much from a gardener in North Carolina. I grew up in the Blue Ridge Mountains and now live in Chapel Hill. A beautiful presentation. Hillary saying thank you all from Tennessee, doing our part to reduce monocrop lawns here. And Hillary, I see a big map of the states behind you on your wall. Well done.
Hillary, where are you at in Tennessee?
I'm in Nashville, and this is not necessarily patriotism. It is the soil colors of the continental U.S.
Fantastic. Absolutely.
Pedology, not patriotism.
Great.
Brilliant.
Much healthier. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Jared. Brilliant. We look forward to working with you.
Lots of lovely comments, and we'll send them to you, Jared. Thank you so much. Lovely. And hopefully see you before too long.
Sounds great.
Yeah. Thank you. And thanks everybody for tuning in. Okay.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.